see at least one new guy emerge as a contributor at linebacker. Whether we're talking about Jerry, Braden, Kamar, Dylan, what have you seen from those guys and their development and taking that next step?
Well, guys just work really hard this summer. I think our guys have put in a lot of work. As far as production over the summer workouts, I think we've seen as much from a measurable standpoint as we've ever seen since we've been here. Coach Love and his staff did a great job. There's going to be some linebackers that get an opportunity to have a role. And I've been in places where you're playing 5 linebackers, right? I've been in places where you're playing 2. So a lot of that's going to be based on what they're able to do this fall, within fall camp and then throughout the season, right? You want guys that continue to grow.
Coach, the second.
Yeah, I would just say every position on our team is open, right? And what I'm looking for is who performs the best. And then if you have 4 guys that can perform at a level that's worth, performing at, a winning level, that they do it at a great job, the people around them play better, then that's going to create an opportunity for them.
If you could put it into words, what's the central theme going into the season?
I kind of said it the other day, but double down, right? And that can't be misconstrued with the difference of growth, because growth is really important. But you look at our team over time and you say, man, this process has worked, right? We've gotten better every single year. We've won more games. We've played competitive football at a really high level. So the process works. How can we do the process better than anybody else? The pieces that will change within that process is, about us as coaches and us as players figuring out what we do best and what's going to be really tough on our opponents.
Coach, I thought it was really interesting at Media Day. You talked about the service your players have had on the community, how many hours you put in. I'm just wondering, how does, making players better people have an impact on the field, and why is that important to you? Do you feel like to have that within them?
Well, the only thing that I probably get graded on in my job here is if we win or lose, right? But personally, how do I grade myself? Are these guys walking out the door better humans, right? Are they going to be great fathers, great husbands someday, people that you want in your community, people that business owners want to hire or create their own businesses? I think service has got to be at the heart of what every one of us is about, right? And some people say it, right? Some people it's about having a camera in their face when they're doing something, but for us it's a little bit more than that. And our guys embrace that. I challenged Usman when he first joined our program in player personnel that I want to have a group that does more community service than they've ever done here at Oregon and than it's done around the nation. Like, that's really important to me. And Carl, that entire staff has done a really good job of finding opportunities for our guys to be able to give back. And every one of our players realize that they're unbelievably blessed, to be a part of what we do. And part of that's also preparing them for their future and their opportunity to give back. When you have blessings, you got to bless back.
Back middle, Matt.
You mentioned it earlier that the guys that have left the program, those guys left because they went pro or they just simply ran out of eligibility. Roster retention's a big thing right now, and your program didn't see a lot of players' eligibility leave with their choosing. Why is that going to be a big factor for this team moving forward, and how critical is just roster retention for any program?
Yeah, retention's huge, and I think that's something we've done really well since I've been here. Thinking about going into year 4 now, I don't think we've lost a starter to the transfer portal. I think that speaks to a lot of things. Their players enjoy being here. They feel like they're getting developed. They feel a real connection on our team. I think that's super important because ultimately the players that are on your roster are going to make more of an impact than the players that are joining your roster. And we have some great players that have joined our roster that I think will make a big impact, but the foundation starts with the people that are here and how they grow and what they become.
Back left.
You have a pretty huge game coming up at the end of September. Is that game, or is there another game you're most excited about traveling or going to?
Montana State's the one I'm most excited about. That's your coach speak for the day.
Last row here, Sam, on the right.
Talk a bit about Kenyon Sadiq and what your expectations are for him going forward, as well as the impact he's had so far.
I think Kenyon's one of the most dynamic players in college football. And he's just grown and gotten better every single year that he's been here. What I love that I'm starting to see show up in Kenyon that I haven't seen as much of before is the leadership traits that are starting to develop. And I think things that I used to say about Terrence Ferguson or Pat Herbert, right, guys that have been here before, now I'm starting to say those same things about Kenyon, the way he takes the field, the way he works in practice drills, the effort to film, all those pieces are really adding up. But Kenyon's always been an unbelievable player. I think this will be a great season for him to have a coming out party.
Front right, James.
Dan, there seems to be a real divide in terms of perception and reality with Bear, nationally speaking, about the transfers going back to his high school era, about work ethic. Some would say he quit on SC last season. Yet all of his former SC teammates, including those in the league, rave about him, talk about how smart he is and how hard he works. Lincoln raved about him. If a guy quit on a team, that wouldn't be the case. They wouldn't former teammates, coaches wouldn't respect it. When you see it every day, when your relationship goes back with him as many years as you do, what is it that the nation isn't seeing from this young man that earns that respect, even if it hasn't worked out at a couple of spots?
Well, Bear's worked his tail off since he's been here, and I think he understands the perception that's out there. And like you said, perception isn't always reality. He puts in more time when it comes to film study, when it comes to extra work, than almost anybody in our program. And I think that speaks to his commitment. I also think he realized, hey, this is an opportunity for me to really set the stage for what am I going to be defined as moving forward. And he realizes, everybody wants individual success, but I think Bear's one of those guys that realizes that comes through team success. He's a guy that understands what standard looks like. And there was some in between there for him, but I think he felt really comfortable coming here, knowing that what it was like at Georgia and how could he recreate some of that experience coming to a place like Oregon. The relationship there certainly mattered. I'm excited to see what Bear does. He's worked his tail off since he's been here. He's been a pleasure to coach. He's going to have some up and down moments like every player in our program will when they get here. But so far, I'm really pleased with what I've seen from Bear. I'm excited to see what he's able to do out there on the field for us this year.
Front middle, Max.
Dan, we know you're a defensive guy, obviously, but as a head coach, you have to have some sort of a role with the offense as well. How do you kind of like to attack that and leave your mark on the offensive side of the ball?
Well, I think there's certain standards you talk about, like the identity of a program. And what's important to me is we have an identity, right? And regardless of who our offensive coordinator has been, Will's done an unbelievable job now going into year 3. The offensive staff, like you talk about continuity, we have a lot of that right now across the board with our staff. What I learned from Coach Saban was just the attention to detail of where's your time spent and how do you use it, and whether it's a meeting with offensive staff on a Monday night or a Tuesday night for a third down red area or a Wednesday night to go over game, like we have that kind of laid out to where I know I can be a part of it. And I want to see their creativity. I want to see an offensive staff and our offensive game plan be something that changes over time that's difficult to defend, but they know what I feel really strong about, and they know where I'm like, hey, go be creative. Let's see what we can come up with. And some of the best offensive coaches I've ever been around, whether it's visiting with Andy Reid or seeing some of the things that we've done at places I've been in the past, I think you have to look for ways to step outside the box, but don't lose the central framework of it's about players, it's about matchups, it's about executing at a really high level, and those are the things that we've been able to do here the last few years.
We got time for 2 more right here, front middle with the tie.
Coach, with some new faces at key positions, especially coming in at quarterback, we talked a little bit about Kenyon Sadiq being a key target. Talk to me about the chemistry that your skilled players are building with their new quarterbacks and what you hope to see, how you hope to see that grow throughout fall camp.
Yeah, it happens through fall camp, right? So there's been some of that this summer. These guys have had some throwing sessions this summer. They've had some stuff this spring, but this is where you really have to get into a rhythm. And early on, we've always done it. I love seeing different people out there with different groups so we can mix the groups up and figure out who's gonna excel, who's a difference maker in that 11 guys that are on the field, who's a guy that makes the people around him better. And then there's that piece of finding rhythm once you start to identify those people. So we'll work with several guys out there on the field, several guys throwing to different people throughout fall camp, and then we'll settle into a group that we feel like gives us the best chance.
Last question, James, here on the right.
Dan, if you could reflect back to your first season compared to this one, specifically at the receiver position, you've overhauled a lot of position groups, and this roster is now 100% guys that either you signed or brought in via the portal. But in that year, there were experienced guys, maybe didn't have a ton of production, and a lot of young guys, to now kind of a similar situation. Can you speak to the similarities that there may or may not be, and how much Junior did to help morph that room and bring it to where it is, and what Ross can do to put his stamp on it now, and what he's already doing on the recruiting trail going forward?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's been some great wideouts to play at Oregon, but I don't think that's something that Oregon's ever necessarily been known for. And you look over the last few years at some of the guys that have been performing for us, whether it's going back to like Troy, right, or what Tez has done more recently. Like we've been able to have some real success with our wideouts. And I even think back to that, the beginning years of early guys like Chase Cota that made such an impact just because of the way he carried himself, what kind of leader he was. And then obviously Junior did a great job with talent acquisition and developing relationships in that room. Big fan of June. Excited to see what he does with the Cowboys, but Ross has a new challenge, and he's certainly up to that challenge. You look at how he coaches, the details that he puts in it, the experience he's had, whether it's with the Patriots or Syracuse, or even his experience of being on the defensive side of the ball, or earlier in his career. I think all those things are going to really pay dividends for our guys this season. And we have some of that same thing again. We have some young guys, and then we have some guys that have a lot of experience or at least a lot of time in that room, whether it's Gary Bryant or Justice Lowe, guys that have been in there for a long time, know what it looks like, and then some young guys that are going to be coming up and have an opportunity to make an impact.
Thanks, Coach.
Appreciate you guys.